Chapter 14. When Balance is Broken. The feast roared with quiet joy. For a village shaped by reverence and restraint, the celebration was gentle, laughter shared in low voices, wooden cups clinking in gratitude rather than indulgence. Children gathered around low fires, their eyes bright as elders told half-remembered tales of before. Ronan sat near the edge of the gathering, the warmth of food and flickering light drawing out the tension still coiled in his shoulders. The morning's ceremony had left its mark, subtle, profound, and at the centre of it all stood the Mother of Balance. She moved like wind through tall grass, soft, measured, and impossible not to notice. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the gravity of centuries and the tenderness of loss. "In all things," she said, lifting her cup with steady hands, "we seek neither dominion nor submission, but harmony. We do not fear the world, nor do we bend it to our will. We listen. We wait. We guide with open hands." The villagers murmured their agreement as one, heads bowed. Ronan stood in the centre of the gathering ring, the scent of roasted root bread and herb-smoked meat still faint in the air, already replaced by panic. A guard burst through the line of dancers, pale and breathless. "They're here!" he cried. "The ones with the sigil, the old mark." Gasps rippled. Someone dropped a clay cup. All heads turned toward the elder platform where the mother stood. Ronan's heart thudded. "The Guardians? Here?" Before the mother could even speak, a voice rang out, sharp, young, and burning with fear. "This is judgment," cried a boy not much younger than Ronan. "He brought it. He desecrated the archive." Another chimed in. "He carries relics of the old city. And now the enforcers of balance walk among us?" They began shouting over each other. "It's him! Balance demands reparation. He should be sacrificed. Appease them before the gods strike again." The younger villagers surged forward, fists raised, not striking but surrounding him, a ring of bodies and terror, a wall of shame. Ronan backed up a step, then another. I'm not..." He couldn't finish. His words were sand in the wind. Then the mother's voice rang like a temple bell. "Enough!" Silence fell like a spell. She descended from the platform without haste, her white robes dragging across the moss and dust of the gathering ring. Her cane struck once, then twice. She moved into the ring and stood between Ronan and the crowd. "You would answer imbalance with murder?" she asked, her voice sharp enough to cut stone. "Strike a child who bears no blade?" "But he opened the archive," one youth said. She turned slowly toward him. "Yes, he did. And what did the archive do in return? Did it cast him out? Did it kill him? No, it gave him knowledge." The murmurs flared again. "Young fools," she said without anger. "You are too eager to burn what you do not understand." She turned back to Ronan, her eyes soft now. "Come." He hesitated. "Now," she said again, "we will meet the Guardians, together." Then she reached out, not to grab but to guide, her hand wrapped gently around his forearm. With that, the Mother of Balance led him from the ring. Behind them voices rose, some fearful, some furious. The older villagers tried to hold the line, the crowd fractured into argument and dread. Down the overgrown path they went, past the first tier of broken houses and ivy-choked archways, until the trees opened to that old half-sunken trail of stone leading toward the scarred horizon. Ronan glanced back once. The whole village was unravelling, and beside him, the woman who had kept them together for 100 years walked forward with measured steps toward whatever waited in the smoke and silence. Chapter 15. The Path of Judgment. The air was heavy with heat and silence, except for the faint hiss of wind across the scorched stone. Aeliana crouched beside the broken glyphs at the edge of the old trail, fingers hovering over a faint imprint of boot tread still etched in the dust. "Fresh," she murmured. Lyra stood a few paces ahead, arms crossed, sharp eyes scanning the overgrown ruins ahead. He didn't bother to cover his tracks. The trail was clear, too clear. Flattened vines, freshly broken stems, scuff marks in the dirt, spaced in a pattern that said he didn't go willingly. Lyra crouched near a shallow impression, brushing aside a half-wilted leaf. Boot print, not Ronan's. He was dragged. See how the heel scuffs? Someone was carrying him. Aeliana nodded, following with sharp eyes. At least 4 others. No attempt to cover their tracks. She glanced up toward the narrowing trail that weaved into the deeper ruin. They weren't hiding. Or, Lyra muttered, they didn't need to. This is their territory. Aeliana said nothing, but the set of her jaw said she agreed. The deeper they moved, the more the ancient city pressed in around them. Towering trees grew through shattered archways. Vines clung to the bones of once proud elven architecture. And beneath it all, that odd pulsing hum, like the magic that once lived here still whispered through the stone. Then, a sound. Not magical, not subtle. A rising chorus of voices. Lyra's ears twitched. She turned slightly, head tilted. They're not hiding either, she said. That's a lot of boots. Marching fast. No rhythm. Aeliana froze, focused, listening. Her eyes narrowed. They're not hunting us, she said slowly. They're chasing something else. Lyra turned, expression tightening. Or they're chasing us, and they just don't know we're not the threat. Both women shifted off the trail, ducking beneath an overgrown archway and crouching in the long ferns. Aeliana motioned, "Wait, listen." The sound came closer. Dozens of voices now, shouting, arguing, panicked. A flurry of footsteps, the calls of children being pulled along, the heavy footfalls of guards. Through a crack in the stone, Aeliana saw the first of the villagers emerge into view, clad in leathers and cloth dyed in earth tones. Some wore markings that resembled Guardian crests, but stylized, reimagined, dyed in faded paints rather than burnished metal. Lyra muttered, "That's a whole damn village on the move." "And scared," Aeliana replied. "Look, some of them are carrying weapons, but they're not ready to use them. They're reacting. Something shook them." A moment passed. Then from the back of the procession, a voice shouted, clearer than the others. "She comes, the one who walks in silver light. Balance, preserve us." Aeliana stiffened. Her sigil glimmered faintly on her bracer. Lyra looked sideways at her. "That mean you or me?" "Probably me," Aeliana murmured grimly. They saw the mark. "Lucky you." The crowd swept past their hiding spot, eyes forward, toward the blackened circle they'd emerged from not long ago. And just as quickly, 2 guards halted, sniffing the air, scanning. Aeliana raised a hand. No sudden moves. Lyra sighed. "You always say that right before something dumb happens." Aeliana stepped into view. Aeliana stepped from behind the moss-covered stone archway, her silver-lined bracer catching a sliver of filtered sunlight. The light flared briefly, illuminating the mark of the Guardian etched into the metal. A hush rippled through the nearest villagers. Gasps, then whispers. "She bears the crest. The balance has returned." Is it her? The one from the stories? One of the guards, tense, broad-shouldered, a long staff in hand, moved to intercept her, but an older woman in forest robes laid a hand on his arm. "Wait." Behind Aeliana, Lyra stepped out more cautiously. "Great," she muttered. "They think you're a bloody prophet. That always ends well." Aeliana didn't flinch. Her posture remained firm, her voice even. "We are not here to harm you." The gathered villagers shifted uncertainly. Many still held on to fear, but not all. A few younger ones stared in awe. One boy clutched a carved wooden token bearing a twisted version of the Guardian's symbol. "We came following someone taken," Aeliana said clearly. "A young man, Ronan. He was pulled from a ruined site not far from here. At that name, the mood snapped. A wave of whispers and fearful glances rippled through the crowd. The outsider. He defiled the archive. He brought imbalance. Aeliana's brow tightened. We don't know what he's done, only that he's in danger, and we intend to find him, not to pass judgment. The same older woman who calmed the guard stepped forward. Her eyes were clouded with age but sharp with purpose. She spoke slowly with reverence and weariness woven into every word. You wear the mark, but the balance does not come without weight. Aeliana met her gaze. I know. The woman inclined her head, almost a bow, but not quite. Then walk carefully, Guardian. There are those here who would call for fire and blood to restore what was lost. I will walk you to her. Aeliana blinked. Her? The elder nodded. The mother of balance. She waits. She felt your arrival. She always feels the shift. Behind her, Lyra whispered under her breath. This place just keeps getting weirder. Aeliana didn't reply. Instead, she followed. The village trail, once overgrown and silent, now trembled with footsteps. Anxious murmurs filled the air, but a sudden stillness spread as the crowd reached a bend between the great trees. All eyes locked on the figures waiting there. Two strangers, women cloaked in quiet strength. The one in front, calm and composed, bore the unmistakable sigil of the Guardians of Balance upon her bracer. The other walked with sharper eyes, hands hovering near the twin daggers at her hips, watching the crowd with suspicion. A murmur spread. They followed him. They bear the mark. They've come to decide. Then the crowd parted. Not pushed or ordered, but pulled, as if some unseen wind of reverence moved through them. And at the head of it all, leaning heavily on her carved staff, stepped the Mother of Balance. Her long white braids were bound with vines, her robes like woven bark and starlight. Beside her stood Ronan, visibly shaken but unharmed. Aeliana and the mother locked eyes across the distance. No words passed, only something deeper, ancient, mutual. Then the mother bowed. It was not dramatic, it was not ceremonial, it was honest. A slow lowering of her head, a hand pressed lightly over her heart, a sign of honor, guardian to guardian. The crowd gasped, and then, as if carried by instinct, the rest followed. Dozens of heads bowed, elders, children, guards, even those who moments before had whispered of sacrifice and fear. Lyra blinked. Well, that's one way to shut them up. Aeliana stepped forward, her gaze never leaving the mother's. She inclined her head in return, not lower, not higher, equal. You must be the one holding them together, Aeliana said quietly. The mother gave a smile like weathered stone. As best I can. But even balance needs support. She extended a hand toward Ronan. This one did not bring doom, only questions. Perhaps now, we may find some answers. Chapter 16. Whispers Beneath the Balance. The crowd lingered like stirred dust, uneasy, hushed, unsure whether to flee, kneel, or press for answers. But the moment the Mother of Balance gestured for Aeliana to walk with her, the air shifted again. The path cleared as the two women moved together toward a shaded alcove near the sacred pool. Behind them, Lyra gave an exaggerated sigh. Crowds. Always love a show, she muttered. Ronan glanced sideways at her, still tense. They wanted to sacrifice me 5 minutes ago. Lyra grinned, resting a hand on his shoulder as if they were old friends. And now they want to crown you a cautionary tale. You've got flair, I'll give you that. They turned toward the villagers who were dispersing reluctantly. Murmurs still carried, but no one dared approach too close now. Come on, Lyra said, nudging him gently. Let's walk. You're going to need help not stepping in more sacred ground. Meanwhile, under the shade of vine-draped stone arches, the Mother of Balance poured water into a bowl between them. Its surface rippled, catching the dappled light like a living lens. You carry yourself like one who's seen war, the mother said softly. Aeliana didn't flinch. I've seen too much and not enough. You are young, but your eyes, they hold weight. Aeliana studied the water. I came for the boy. I stayed for the silence, this place. I felt its grief before I ever saw the ruins. That grief lives in all of us, the mother said, her voice like wind against bark. 100 years ago, we watched arrogance destroy everything. Those who claimed to guide the realms tried to control them instead. The Guardians once stood for balance. The ones who built that city mocked it. And now? Now we remember, the mother whispered. Now we preserve. We guide gently. We mourn those who couldn't learn. Aeliana looked away. He didn't know what he was walking into. Ronan's still young, but he's listening to the lay. That's more than most. The mother gave a slow nod. He carries something rare, a kind of resonance. You see it too. I'm beginning to. She turned to the elder. I need to report back to my council. But I want to understand first. Everything. You'll have what I know, the mother said. And perhaps you'll help us understand him. Back near the edge of the village, Lyra leaned back against a mossy wall, watching Ronan poke at a carved symbol in the stone. He hesitated. What happens now? Lyra shrugged. We play nice. Let the big ones talk. Try not to touch more cursed objects. He gave a half smile. Thanks for not handing me over. She smirked. Oh, I considered it. But then I'd still be stuck listening to Aeliana explain root systems and ethical protocol to Moss. He laughed, startled. Lyra pushed off the wall, stretching. So, thanks. For screwing everything up just enough to make things interesting. He blinked. You're welcome? You'll get used to me. And with that, she started walking, hands behind her head. Chapter 17. 3 days beneath the veil. The first morning passed in measured silence. Aeliana stayed close to the Mother of Balance, asking questions not with the arrogance of authority, but with the care of a student. She observed the village, not just with her eyes, but with her instincts. The way the people moved, the way they bowed, not out of fear, but reverence. Reverence not for her, but for the balance itself. It humbled her. They walked the outer ring of the ruins that once had been a city of ambition and pride. The mother called it Narethyl, though the name was rarely spoken aloud now, only in morning chants and the quiet remembrance of fire. These stones remember, the mother told her. Magic still hums beneath the cracks, but we do not call it forth. We let it rest. Aeliana traced a sigil on one of the ancient arches, burned black but still faintly pulsing with ley line resonance. You could teach the council much, she said quietly. We have nothing they want, the mother replied with a distant sadness. By afternoon, Aeliana turned to more practical needs. Your people, she said. What do they lack? Food, medicine, tools. I may not be able to promise everything, but I will make your needs heard. The mother studied her, long and thoughtful. We do not lack, but the children grow restless. They wish for books, for voices from other places. They hunger not for bread, but for story. That struck Aeliana deeply. I can send scrolls, transcribed histories, perhaps even storytellers if any still roam. The mother smiled gently. You already brought one. He just doesn't know it yet. Elsewhere, Lyra took Ronan to observe the villagers in their daily rhythm. He watched them tend gardens without enchantment, build shelters with woven reeds and wooden tools. You're not going to like what I say, he muttered, but this feels right, like a place still in balance. Lyra chewed on a fruit she'd stolen from a basket. Don't mistake peace for stagnation. You go too long without pushing the walls, they start pressing inward. He raised a brow. You were never going to be a proper guardian, were you? She grinned. Oh, gods, no. That evening, Aeliana sat with the younger villagers. She taught them a simple light spell, only enough to warm the palms. No flame, no force. Just the feeling of a ley line responding to a whisper, rather than a command. A little girl cried when the light danced in her hand, not because it was bright, but because it responded. Balance, Aeliana thought, isn't fear of power. It's the wisdom to wield it without pride. Chapter 18. The Tale of the First Step. The second morning dawned warm and clear, sunlight filtering through the reclaimed trees like a quiet blessing. Children gathered near the outer circle of the village, sitting cross-legged on smooth stones. Word had spread. The outsider was going to speak. They waited with quiet reverence, some peeking out from behind older siblings or woven blankets. Ronan sat on a flat stump, a little awkward, turning a smooth locket over in his fingers before slipping it into his pouch. He cleared his throat. "I'm not a hero," he began. "I'm not a guardian. I wasn't sent by kings or councils or gods." The children leaned in. "I was just a boy who didn't know where he belonged." He told them about the portal, the sealed one hidden in the hills, about his mentor Maren, his parents, the arguments, the choice, and about leaving. "I left behind everything. I didn't know what I'd find, only that something in the world was broken, and I had to go looking." He described the devastation he stepped into, the wreckage, the silence, the pain of magic clinging to the ruins like smoke that didn't fade. The children watched him with wide eyes. "And then I met all of you," he said. "But before that, I was just someone walking, listening, remembering." He tapped his temple the same way the bard had. "The world is full of forgotten things," he said, voice quiet. "Someone just has to make a point of finding them." One of the older boys raised a hand. "Is that why you wear the flame and feather pin?" Ronan touched it at his collar. "A reminder of where I've been, of the stories I carry, of the people who gave me safe passage, and those who didn't." Another child whispered, "Will you tell more?" Ronan smiled, genuinely for the first time in days. "Yes," he said, "so long as you're listening." The evening quiet settled gently over the village. After the feast, the fires had been banked low and the children sent off to sleep with dreams of distant ruins and wandering tales. Ronan sat beneath an ancient tree on the village's edge, knees pulled up, a carved cup of something herbal in his hands. He didn't hear her approach at first. "You tell a good story." Aeliana's voice was soft. Neither command nor judgment, just presence. She moved with grace, her silver-threaded cloak barely whispering against the grass. Ronan looked up. "You heard?" "I listened." She sat beside him, leaving a respectful space between them. The quiet stretched for a moment. "I've read about this place," she said at last. "Only fragments. Mentions in footnotes, warnings buried in Guardian treatises." He tilted his head, curious. "It was called Narethyl," she continued, "though even that name is debated in the texts. The scrolls said it was a splinter sect, elves who broke from Alfheim's path, rejecting the balance in favour of control." She folded her hands. "They tried to reshape the ley lines, bend the weave of realms, but something went wrong." Ronan glanced toward the centre of the ruins, where the earth still bore scars like a cauterized wound. "And you read that in Guardian archives?" She nodded. "But the scrolls are sealed. High clearance only. I was still a senior apprentice. Too young, too untested. But you remember." "I remember every fragment," she said almost wistfully. "I wanted to know more. The elders told me it wasn't relevant to my duties, that the past was best left quiet." Ronan smiled faintly. "That's what they told me too, about the portal, about curiosity." They sat in shared silence, both shaped by systems that measured worth in secrecy. Finally, Aeliana asked, "What was it like, walking through that ruin?" Ronan looked toward the dark horizon where ash still clung to some distant walls. Like hearing a scream trapped in stone, he said. Like being watched by history that never got the ending it wanted. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, you were lucky to survive? I think I was meant to, Ronan replied. Aeliana turned to study him, really study him. You're not a guardian, she said gently, but maybe you're something else the world needs. He blinked, surprised. You think so? I don't know yet, she admitted, but the balance shifts for a reason. Ronan tapped his temple just like the bard had. The world's full of forgotten things. Aeliana gave the faintest smile. And we just have to make a point of finding them. Later that night, the village had gone quiet. Its revelries settled into embers and snores. Ronan lay on his cot, blanket kicked off, mind spinning too fast to let sleep find him. He stared at the ceiling beams above, thinking of ancient ruins, of falling cities, of scrolls that should have never survived. A soft rustle at the window. He turned as Lyra crouched in the sill, silhouetted by moonlight, a sly grin on her face. Well? She whispered. You coming or what? He sat up, rubbing his face. I knew that look meant trouble. I call it initiative. She dropped to the floor with barely a sound. We've got maybe 2 hours before anyone notices. You're serious? Deadly. You said you found scrolls. Let's go read them. They moved fast but quiet, Ronan leading the way along the winding trail back to the crumbling shell of the archive. Moonlight slanted across the stone floor as they stepped inside. The runes etched into the doorway still glowed faintly from earlier. He unlatched the seal. This is where I stopped reading, he said, brushing dust off the second set of scrolls. I didn't get this far. Lyra unrolled the parchment slowly. Her playful grin was gone now, replaced by something sharper, like a blade recognizing its whetstone. Ronan lit a small mage light, careful to keep the glow low. Lines of faded script danced across the page in an older dialect. She read aloud under her breath. The path to ascendancy lies not in balance but in will. Guardians are blind shepherds. We were never meant to follow. Ronan's mouth tightened. They weren't trying to live apart from Alfheim. They were planning a takeover. Lyra moved to another scroll, this one heavier, sealed with a wax crest that had cracked with age. She broke it open carefully. The next lines made her blood run cold. Operation Unbinding proceeds. 3 nexuses identified. The final strike against the Guardian Order will commence upon the full convergence of ley. The great balance will fall, and the cycle will belong to us. Lyra lowered the scroll. They were going to burn it all down. She sat back hard against the wall. No more games in her eyes, just quiet horror. They planned to destroy Alfheim. Ronan crouched beside her, but it never happened. No. She looked around at the half-buried archive, the ruin of ambition. Because this place was struck down first. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Lyra whispered, We shouldn't be reading this. But we are. She looked at him, then nodded, slowly, reluctantly. Then we finish it, all of it. If we're going to decide what to do with this knowledge, we'd better understand what they left behind. Ronan sat beside her, pulled out another scroll, and unrolled it with reverent fingers. In the distance, a nightbird cried. The old stones of the archive held their breath. The past, long buried, was whispering again. Lyra's fingers hovered over the next scroll, hesitant now. The weight of what they'd already read clung to the room like old ash. She glanced at Ronan. Ready? She whispered. No, he said, but open it anyway. She unrolled the parchment slowly. This one was brittle, edges curled, text inked in tight script with red sigils scrawled across the margins. Not meant for ceremony, meant for secrecy. Ronan tilted the mage light closer. Lyra read aloud in a hushed voice. Communication with embedded allies continues uninterrupted. The High Gate remains unaware. Our messages pass through trusted channels within the Silver Wing and the Watchers of Threshold. She froze, eyes scanning further. One among the Guardians serves knowingly, their loyalty secured through vision and purpose. They believe in our rise, in the cleansing of the cycle. Ronan's breath caught. A Guardian? No name, Lyra murmured. But it's real. One of theirs was part of this. She shook her head slowly, disbelief slipping into cold anger. The Guardians stand for balance, for the oath. This would have torn them apart. Ronan leaned forward, eyes flicking down the scroll. They didn't just have sympathizers, they had access. Look. He pointed to a final line. The laylock on the western gate was undone from within. That's a secured portal, Lyra said, stunned. Only senior Guardians are allowed near it. They both sat back in silence, the weight of the words settling between them. After a long moment, Ronan said, "What do we do with this?" Lyra didn't answer at first. She stared at the scroll, then gently rolled it up and bound it again. "We show Aeliana," she said quietly. "She won't like it." "No," Lyra admitted, "but if we hide this, we're no better than the ones who built this place on lies." Chapter 19. The Hidden Thread. The sun had barely crested the treetops when Aeliana found Lyra waiting just beyond the village square. Her cloak was dusted with morning dew, her expression unreadable. "We need to talk," Lyra said, voice low. "In the archive. Just us." Ronan stood nearby, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He gave Aeliana a small, apologetic nod. Aeliana's brow furrowed, but she followed without question. They entered the silent archive one last time. Dust motes drifted in the pale light filtering through the broken stone. The old scroll lay rolled and ready on the table. Ronan handed it to her. "We found it last night," he said. "Didn't want to risk anyone else seeing it before you." Aeliana took it, slowly unravelling the parchment. Her eyes scanned the text, each line carved deeper into her composure. The room held its breath. When she reached the final line, she stilled. "One among the Guardians serves knowingly." Her fingers clenched the edge of the scroll. "This could be a forgery," she said softly, but even as the words left her mouth, she didn't believe them. Not truly. "No names," Lyra added, "just that someone among your order aided them. A century ago." Aeliana closed her eyes for a moment. "The Guardians swear an oath to the balance above all," she whispered, "to imagine one of us, violating that, guiding a realm's downfall." She trailed off, her shoulders tight. Ronan stepped forward carefully. "You said yourself, this place was sealed, forgotten. If we hadn't come, that scroll would have rotted to dust. Maybe someone didn't want the truth remembered." Aeliana nodded slowly, forcing the scroll closed. "Then it must be remembered now." "What will you tell my Lorien?" Lyra asked. Aeliana met her gaze. "Only that which can be proven, and only in council. This truth is too dangerous for rumours. If it fractured the Guardians once, it could do so again." Lyra gave a small, almost respectful nod. "You're a better apprentice than I ever was." Aeliana didn't smile, but her voice was steady when she said, "And you're not the reckless fool I thought you were." A horn sounded in the distance, 3 short notes. The guards at the old circle had opened the portal. "It's time," Aeliana said. She tucked the scroll into a sealed pouch on her belt and looked to Ronan. "You coming?" Ronan glanced back at the archive, then at the trail ahead. "Not yet. My path's not finished here." "Then may the balance walk with you," Aeliana said. "And with you," Ronan replied quietly. The 3 stepped out of the archive as the village stirred with movement once again. Aeliana paused just before stepping onto the trail. The portal would open for only a short window, and already the guards would be preparing. She turned back to Ronan, studying him for a long, quiet moment. "Your parents will ask about you," she said gently. "Do you want me to carry any words back to them?" Ronan looked down, jaw tightening. For a heartbeat, he didn't answer. Then he reached into his coat and pulled free a small, folded parchment, worn at the edges, as if he'd carried it for days, unsure if he'd ever send it. "I wrote this the first night," he said. "Didn't know if I'd survive long enough to hand it off." Aeliana accepted it with both hands, her expression solemn. She tucked it away carefully. "They love you, Ronan," she said softly, "even if they don't understand you yet." Ronan managed a small smile. "Maybe someday they will, if I make enough noise out here." She reached forward, just briefly, and rested a hand on his shoulder. "You already are." Then she turned, joining Lyra on the path toward the waiting portal, scrolls sealed at her side, the letter secure in her belt. Behind them, Ronan stood tall, watching until they disappeared into the trees. The portal flared open in a shimmer of pale blue light, humming with strain. The energy whipped at the grass and dust around the stone arch, as if the very air were resisting the connection. Lyra emerged first, boots crunching into dirt and ash-blown earth. Her eyes swept the clearing instinctively, hand brushing the dagger at her hip before she relaxed. They were back. Seconds later, Aeliana stepped through, her long coat catching in the breeze as the portal dimmed behind her. The moment her foot touched solid ground, the connection faltered and folded in on itself, vanishing with a soft shh. They were met not by ceremony but by a wall of tension. A small perimeter had been hastily erected. Elven guards in polished silver stood at full alert, weapons sheathed but hands near the hilts. At the front of the line stood Councillor Mylorian, cloaked in high-ranking formal robes but travel-worn, his expression as unreadable as ever. And just behind him, Ronan's parents. His mother's hand was clenched over her heart. His father stood stiffly, arms behind his back, but his eyes locked instantly on the two who emerged. Aeliana stepped forward and bowed. "Councillor!" Mylorian said nothing. His sharp gaze moved from her to Lyra, then back again. "You were given 3 days," he said coldly. "You returned at the exact hour. I expected no less." Lyra let out a dramatic sigh and leaned in slightly toward Aeliana. "Is that the closest we're going to get to a welcome home?" "Silence," Mylorian snapped, not loudly, but with enough force that the guards instinctively straightened. Aeliana's shoulders didn't flinch, but her voice dropped in tone. "I accept full responsibility for the breach in procedure. I apologize for any damage caused by our presence." Then slowly, she bowed lower. "Forgive me, Master." The title wasn't said out of habit. It was offered with weight, humility. Mylorian's jaw tensed. "I expected such recklessness from your companion," he said, flicking a glance at Lyra. "But from you?" Aeliana straightened. There were things that needed to be seen firsthand. A breath passed. Then Mylorian simply turned to the others. "Detain no one. We will debrief at the council chamber." Ronan's mother stepped forward, not waiting for permission. "Please, did you find him?" Aeliana met her eyes gently. She reached into her pouch and withdrew the folded letter, sealed in Ronan's wax. "I did. He is safe." She placed the letter in the mother's trembling hand. "He asked me to give this to you." There was a pause, just long enough for 1,000 questions to form behind the woman's eyes. Aeliana added softly, "He's not the same boy you knew, but I believe he's becoming something you can be proud of. What he did, what he discovered, matters." Before she could say more, Mylorian's eyes snapped toward her. She felt the weight of that glance, the one every apprentice had learned to recognize, a silent warning. Aeliana inclined her head toward the parents, her voice respectful. "That's all I can say. For now." Then she stepped back into place, hands clasped before her. The moment had passed, but the emotion lingered. Aeliana stood before Mylorian with her head bowed low. The wind tugged gently at her cloak, rustling the edges like whispered judgment. "I take full responsibility," she said, her voice calm but weighted. "I should have contained the situation before Lyra acted." Mylorian's expression remained unreadable. his silence stretched, powerful in its restraint. Finally, he spoke, not with anger, but disappointment. "I expected better. From you." Aeliana's eyes flinched. She gave a single deeper bow, the formal mark of acceptance. Behind her, Lyra stood half a step back, arms crossed, smirking faintly as if daring someone to blame her. But Malorian didn't look her way. "You will submit a full report," he said to Aeliana. "You will also account for any cultural contact, violations of protocol, and what exactly you uncovered." "Yes, Master." Ronan's parents stood a few paces from the portal site, watching the silent space where their son had once crossed. The tension in the air had thinned but not lifted. Then, as if remembering something sacred, Ronan's mother reached inside her satchel and drew out the letter. She turned to her husband and whispered, "Come." Together, they stepped beneath the silverleaf tree at the edge of the hill, where the light spilled down in quiet gold. She unfolded the parchment carefully, hands trembling. Her husband stood beside her, one arm already wrapping around her shoulders as she began to read aloud. "Mother, I promised you I'd write. I wish I could sit beside you and say these things aloud, but the path I've taken doesn't allow for that, at least not yet. You always said I was different, that I looked at the world sideways like I was listening for something no one else could hear. Maybe you were right. I think I was listening. And now, I've heard it. Something ancient and quiet, calling from the corners of forgotten places. I followed it like the bard said. And I think, just maybe, I was meant to. I want you to know I'm safe. Tired, yes. Changed, maybe. But safe. And learning more than I ever imagined. There are people here who still believe in the balance, who remember what happens when we lose sight of it. I think I was meant to find them. I'm sorry for how I left. I know it hurt. I hated leaving you in silence, but if I'd stayed, I would have drowned in expectations that never fit. I couldn't be the son Father wanted, but I hope I can still be the son you believe in. You gave me my heart, Mother. You taught me compassion and wonder, and to question the world when it stops making sense. You are the reason I have the courage to walk into the unknown. Tell Father I'm sorry, truly. I hope he'll understand one day. Tell Master Marin I haven't wasted what he taught me, and tell the stars I haven't forgotten them. I will come home. I don't know when, but you'll know me when you see me, because I'll still be your son. Ronan. The wind passed softly through the trees. Ronan's mother pressed the letter to her heart, lips trembling. Her husband stood motionless for a long time, brow furrowed deep, but his hand remained on her shoulder, grounding her. After several quiet moments, he reached over and folded the letter again with care. No words were spoken, but the silence for once did not feel empty. Chapter 20. The Hourglass Turns. The hall outside the Grand Council chamber was quiet. Ancient murals lined the arched walls, etched scenes of the founding Guardians walking between worlds, flame and starlight caught in their palms. The air smelled faintly of old parchment and silver-leaf polish, a scent Aeliana had known since childhood. Normally, it calmed her. Not today. She stood straight-backed before the gilded double doors, her travel-worn cloak brushed clean, her tunic retied in perfect symmetry. The sealed pouch containing the dangerous scroll was hidden beneath her belt sash. She could feel its weight like a brand. Beside her, Lyra leaned against the wall, arms crossed, foot tapping faintly. There was a smudge of dried mud still on her left sleeve, and a welt on her temple where a tree branch had snagged her. She looked like she couldn't decide whether to bolt or brag. Aeliana ignored her posture. She'd learned long ago that Lyra was sharpest when she looked like she didn't care. Footsteps approached, precise and measured. Councillor Maelorion emerged from the shadowed corridor, robes shifting like a storm cloud behind him. His silver circlet marked him as senior, but he had left the ceremonial staff behind. This was not yet council business. He stopped a few paces from them, gaze as cutting as ever. "You requested an audience before the hearing," he said. "I assume this concerns your report." Aeliana bowed deeply. "Yes, Master. It must be reviewed behind closed doors. Only with the senior triad." Melorian's eyes narrowed faintly. "Protocol dictates all findings be shared with the full council." "This isn't a finding," Lyra cut in, her voice uncharacteristically serious. Melorian turned to her slowly. "You are not a Guardian." "No," Lyra said, standing taller. "But I saw it too. And if this gets out the wrong way, you'll have more than a broken protocol on your hands. You'll have rebellion in the ranks." Mylorion didn't speak right away. His gaze returned to Aeliana. "What exactly did you uncover?" "I'll speak of it only to the three," she said quietly. "It concerns events preceding the fall of Narethyl and touches directly upon Guardian integrity, a betrayal, possibly from within." That made him blink, just once. Silence swelled between them. At last, Mylorion exhaled, a short clipped breath like air cutting through a sword drawer. "Very well. I will summon Valith and Thandor. You will present your case in the inner hall. No records will be made unless we deem it credible." Aeliana bowed again. "Thank you, Counselor." Mylorion turned to leave, then paused. His voice came over his shoulder like tempered steel. "If this is some misguided attempt to draw attention or curry influence, even your discipline will not shield you." Aeliana's voice was steady. "Then it is a good thing I seek neither." The old elf gave a final nod and disappeared through the side corridor. The hall fell silent again. Lyra let out a long breath. "I thought he was going to flay us with his eyes." "He still might," Aeliana murmured, her gaze fixed on the mural before her, the one that showed three guardians sealing a dark portal with nothing but their wills. Lyra nudged her. "You did good, Storm Girl." Aeliana didn't smile, but she allowed the compliment to settle between them like a pact. "The hourglass turns now," she said softly, and together they waited for the doors to open. The inner hall was unlike the grand chambers most guardians ever saw. No murals adorned these walls, no polished banners or crystal sconces. Only carved stone, etched with ancient runes of silence and truth-binding, magic that ensured what was spoken here would remain here. The floor was a spiral of black and silver granite, circling inward to a raised dais with three high-backed chairs. The air was still, listening. Mylorion stood at the centre, flanked by Councillor Valith and Councillor Thandor, senior guardians whose expressions revealed nothing. Each wore the silver-trimmed cloak of their station, and behind them, the seal of the triumvirate glowed faintly in the quiet room. As the heavy doors sealed shut behind them, Lyra muttered under her breath, "Cozy place." Aeliana gave her a warning glance. Then she turned, voice low but firm. "Let me do the talking, please." Lyra hesitated, then nodded once. She folded her arms and stepped to the side, letting Aeliana move forward alone to the centre ring. Mylorion inclined his head. "Proceed." Aeliana drew a slow breath and reached beneath her belt sash. Pulling free the sealed leather pouch, she held it up. 3 days ago, this was recovered from the lower archive beneath the ruins of Narethyl. It was hidden behind false shelving, protected by the remnants of a shattered seal. We believe it was placed there during the final hours of the fall. Valith leaned forward slightly. "And what does it contain?" "Testimony," Aeliana said. "Not from a guardian, but from one of the Narethyl elders. It outlines a plan forged in secrecy, a coordinated betrayal of the balance itself." She opened the pouch and drew out the scroll, carefully, respectfully. Then she laid it on the reading table between them. "I've read it twice. Lyra read it once. Neither of us tampered with it. The scroll speaks of agents placed in Alfheim, spies within the courts, the military, and among the Guardians. That made even Thandor shift. No names? Melorian asked. None, she replied. The author either did not know or deliberately withheld them. But the intent is clear. Narethyl's ruling body, their forefathers, plotted to weaken the ley lines between realms. They believed the Guardians had grown too strong, that the balance was no longer mutual but weighted. Valeth's voice was soft. And you believe this document is real? I believe it survived because someone wanted it forgotten, Aeliana said. Had it been false, it would have been publicized, weaponized. Instead, it was buried, hidden in a place only the most desperate would ever search. Thandor's hand moved slowly, tracing a rune carved into his chair arm. If one of us turned, truly turned, it could fracture the order from within. It nearly did, Aeliana said. Narethyl fell. The children were saved. The rest, ash. Melorian remained silent, his gaze piercing. Then, why bring this now? Why not file it with the usual report and await review? Aeliana didn't flinch. Because if this truth leaks out as rumour, it will cause paranoia, fear, and factionalism among the lower ranks. I will not be the torch that lights that fire. But if it is real, if we are vulnerable still, then only the three can decide how to move forward. Lyra shifted, but said nothing. Melorian studied his apprentice for a long moment. And you believe this scroll proves such a vulnerability? I believe it demands an answer, Aeliana replied. Silence again. Then Valeth spoke, slow and heavy. We will read it, together. If we find it genuine, it will not leave this chamber until we are ready. Aeliana bowed her head. That is all I ask. Melorian gave a faint nod. You've done your duty. You may go. She turned but paused. There is one more matter, she said. The boy, Ronan. Melorion's brow lifted slightly. He's not a guardian. But he found the archive, reached it with no guidance, only instinct, and a story he heard once in childhood. He is untrained, undisciplined, and reckless. But I believe he was meant to find it, or it meant to be found by him. Are you recommending we recruit him? Thandor asked. No, Aeliana said. Not yet. But I recommend we watch him. He walks paths long forgotten, and sometimes those are the ones the balance calls to most. The three exchanged glances. They said nothing. Aeliana gave one last bow, then turned and walked back toward the door. Lyra fell into step beside her. Only when the doors closed behind them did she finally speak. Well, Lyra muttered, that wasn't terrible. It's not over yet, Aeliana replied. Now we wait, and hope they don't decide to erase the past. Again. Aeliana didn't answer, but her silence said more than words ever could. The fire in their chamber had burned low, casting soft shadows against the stone walls. Aeliana stood at the small table, hands folded behind her back, while Lyra paced near the window, every movement tight with pent-up energy. They had said all they needed to say before the council. Now came the judgment. A soft knock. Then the door creaked open. Melorian entered without ceremony, his presence stilling the room like a shift in wind before a storm. He wore no robes of office now, only a travel cloak and the sword of his station at his hip. He closed the door behind him. Neither of them bowed. Not this time. Aeliana spoke first. Master. Lyra for once said nothing. Melorian studied them both. His expression unreadable. But the weariness behind his eyes was unmistakable. The council has reviewed the scrolls, he said, and they believe the contents are authentic. That wasn't a surprise, but hearing it aloud made Aeliana's spine stiffen. Then they understand why we did what we did. They understand, Melorian said. They do not approve. He stepped closer, casting a glance toward Lyra. You opened a sealed portal. one that was locked down after the collapse of a realm, without clearance, without backup, without permission. Lyra gave a slow, unapologetic shrug. We saved a life. You also endangered others. His gaze returned to Aeliana. And you followed her. Yes, she said, because someone had to. Do you believe that absolves you? Number. But I'll take whatever punishment is required. She shouldn't face it alone. Lyra blinked at that. Quiet. No smirk this time. Aeliana didn't speak right away. He looked between them. His voice, when it came, was quieter. I did not come to punish you. That caught them both off guard. I came, he continued, because I trained you to hold the balance first. But in doing so, I may have forgotten that the balance is not static. It shifts. It moves. Sometimes it demands we do the same. He stepped closer, folding his hands behind his back. That said, actions have consequences. His eyes turned to Lyra. Lyra, you are placed under restricted travel status for 1 moon cycle. No portals, no fieldwork. You will report daily to the Northern Archives to assist with scroll reclassification. Consider it a way to reconnect with the rules you ignore. Lyra's mouth opened, then closed. 1 moon? Aeliana raised a brow. She nodded quickly. Right. Thank you. He turned to Aeliana. Aeliana Vale, you are not to accompany Lyra during her restriction. You will instead prepare a full summary of the events, not just for council records, but for preservation. The hidden history must be documented, and when it is, you will present it to the next circle of apprentices yourself. Aeliana's breath caught. You want me to teach it? I want you to carry it, Aeliana said, because you understand the weight of it, and because I need someone the young ones can trust to tell hard truths. Silence filled the room for a moment. Then Aeliana bowed, not out of obligation but of quiet acceptance. Thank you, Master. Aeliana turned to leave, but paused at the door. There is more to come. What you uncovered will not stay quiet forever. The balance will demand reckoning. He looked back at Aeliana, softer now. I was hard on you, because I saw what you could become. Now I see that you've become it. Then, with a last nod, he stepped through the door and disappeared into the dim hallway. Lyra exhaled, slumping into a chair. Restricted travel isn't so bad. Beats exile. Aeliana moved to the window, gazing out at the moonlight reflecting off the courtyard stones. He's preparing us, she said. Lyra tilted her head. For what? Aeliana didn't answer. But in her eyes, something had shifted. She knew this was only the beginning. Chapter 21. After the Storm. The path back to the village felt lighter beneath Ronan's boots. Mist curled at the edges of the trail like forgotten breath, and for the first time since his arrival, it was not silent. A distant trill of birdsong echoed faintly through the trees. It wasn't much, just a few chirps, a flutter of wings, but after days of unnatural stillness, it was like hearing hope whisper. He stopped and looked up, scanning the canopy. The trees still bore the scars of imbalance, scorched bark, brittle branches, but now a small green shoot curled defiantly from a crack in the wood. He smiled faintly. Balance doesn't shout, he thought. It returns one heartbeat at a time. By the time he reached the village, the rhythm had changed. People were gathering near the central hearth, not in panic, but in reverent murmurs. Ronan moved quietly past the outer huts, the worn paths now dotted with villagers exchanging glances, not of fear but wonder. He caught sight of a child pointing skyward. "Mama, I saw a bird!" It warmed something in him he hadn't realized had gone cold. At the council hearth, the mother of balance sat among the elders. A fire burned low at the centre and smoke wafted lazily into the air, catching on the sudden breeze. Around her, the circle spoke in low tones, deliberate, contemplative. He waited until the conversation lulled, Then, respectfully, he stepped forward. "They're gone," Ronan said quietly. The Guardians returned through the portal. No blood was spilled. No judgments passed. The mother turned her gaze toward him, the lines of her face deeper now with thought, not age. "We felt the shift," she replied, and then the birds returned. An elder to her right nodded solemnly. "We have not heard birdsong in 3 seasons." A younger counsellor leaned forward. "The signs are undeniable. The presence of the Guardians, this one's arrival, he brought the world's rhythm with him." Ronan hesitated. "It wasn't me alone. If anything, I just tripped over what was buried." "And sometimes," the mother said, "that's all the balance requires. A single step, a single question." She motioned for him to sit on the stone to her left. "You've stirred many things, Wanderer," she said, using the name not as a title but as truth. "The Guardians came and did not destroy us. The forest breathes again. And now the council meets not in fear, but in preparation." "Preparation for what?" he asked. Her gaze turned eastward, where the sun caught the tops of the trees in gold. "For what comes next? The balance doesn't restore itself in a day. This realm remembers, and forgetting is what led to its decay." Another elder spoke. "The animals returning may be a gift or a warning." Ronan looked down, then up again. "I think they're listening, same as we are." A silence fell, this time not heavy but reverent. Finally the mother said, "Go now. Rest. When the sun leans low, return to us. The balance may yet have more to ask of you." Ronan bowed, then turned to go but paused at the edge of the hearth circle. A songbird called once more from the treetops, and this time half the village heard it. Ronan didn't go straight to his hut. Instead, he wandered, slowly, thoughtfully, through the village paths as the morning light slanted down through the thinning mist. The air smelled cleaner today. Not like ash or damp earth, but green, alive. A flutter of wings startled him near the bakery hut. He turned just in time to see a bright feathered bird, yellow and russet, dart from a low branch to perch on a vine-covered post. A pair of children gasped behind him, hands flying to their mouths as if the mere presence of the creature might vanish if they breathed too loud. "It's real," one whispered. The bird tilted its head, sang a clear, high trill, and then took off again, looping through the village before disappearing into the canopy. A chorus of exclamations followed it. "Did you see that? It landed on our roof! I told you they'd come back!" Ronan kept walking, his steps slow, deliberate, eyes scanning everything. Vines had begun to creep back over the stone wall by the well, but not limp or sickly. These were thick green tendrils bearing purple blossoms with golden centres. The flowers were new, never mentioned in anything he'd read, and yet the villagers gathered around them with awe and familiarity, like a friend returned after too long away. The blacksmith stood at her forge, not working, but wiping her hands slowly as she watched a squirrel dart between the trees. Her apprentice whispered, "They were gone. Since the last fire." "I know," the woman murmured, "but now they're back." Near the central garden, an old man with a crooked spine knelt in reverence before a patch of soil that had just yesterday been barren. Now green shoots pressed through the dirt, tiny, fragile, and unstoppable. Like the balance itself, Ronan thought, software but unyielding. As he passed the ceremonial platform, he heard laughter, high, melodic, and uncontrolled. A group of elders sat around a table smiling like children as they watched 2 birds chase each other through the air above the fountain. The laughter echoed like a blessing. He leaned against a carved stone pillar and simply watched. No spells had been cast, no rituals summoned the birds or the blossoms, no guardian had commanded it. The realm was responding, reawakening, as if it had been waiting, holding its breath, and now finally dared to exhale. A child tugged at his coat. Ronan looked down to see a girl with twigs in her hair and dirt on her cheeks. She held a crude drawing, done in charcoal on tanned hide. It was him, standing with arms raised, birds circling overhead. "You brought them back," she said, smiling. "Mother says it wasn't you alone, but I still think you helped." He knelt, accepting the drawing with care. "I'll keep this," he said softly. "Thank you." The girl beamed and skipped away. Ronan straightened slowly, clutching the sketch, heart unexpectedly tight in his chest. It wasn't praise he sought or recognition, it was belonging. And maybe, just maybe, he was finding it. The sun had climbed higher now, casting long shafts of gold through the clearing canopy. The air shimmered faintly with life. Not magic, but something older, something elemental, real. He looked around once more and whispered under his breath, "You're waking up, aren't you?" The breeze that passed through the trees felt like a reply. That night the fires burned brighter. The villagers had gathered in the central circle, where old stones bore moss like cloaks, and children sat cross-legged on woven mats. Meals were simple but warm: roots, grains, early fruits from newly awakened vines, and laughter flowed like water from a cracked spring finally mended. When Ronan stepped forward, the fire cast dancing light across his face, and all eyes turned to him without a word. He didn't need to raise his voice, he didn't even stand tall. He simply began, his voice calm, low, but sure. Once, long before time knew its name, there was a realm that sang. Its rivers whispered in harmony. Its skies danced with stars that answered back. The trees hummed in the old tongue, and the stones remembered. It was not the largest realm, nor the most powerful, but it was the most balanced. All things thrived because all things listened. Until the listening stopped, no war began, no fire fell. But slowly, like sleep overtaking a weary traveller, the realm faded. The birds forgot their songs. The vines forgot their bloom. The stones forgot the words they once kept. And the people forgot. Why? They blamed the wind. They blamed time. They blamed each other. But none dared ask, what did we stop hearing? One day the realm closed its eyes, and the world above it moved on, forgetting that once, beneath its soil, something beautiful had lived. But the realm was not dead, only sleeping, and all it needed was a whisper to remind it how to wake. When Ronan finished, the fire cracked gently as if answering his final word. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then softly, reverently, someone began to hum. A child's voice, then an elder's, then another. The old harmony, the lullaby of balance. Ronan sat quietly as it filled the circle, like fog rising from warm earth, blanketing the village in something ancient and familiar. He stared into the flames, overwhelmed. Not praise, he reminded himself, not recognition, just belonging. And the feeling that this story, this realm, was far from finished. After the circle thinned and families returned to their homes, Mother approached him beneath the roots of the old council tree. She wore no ceremonial robe, only a traveller's shawl and the weight of knowledge passed down through generations. "Walk with me," she said quietly. They moved beyond the torchlight, out to where the earth felt undisturbed. "I have something to show you," she said, and handed him an old parchment, weathered, barely legible. A map, hand-drawn, marked with faded ink. "There's another portal," she said. "Far to the north, in the pine-shaded crags where no birds have flown in generations." Ronan traced the glyph with one finger. "It's inactive. It hasn't stirred in 100 years. The outpost that guarded it, if it still stands, was lost before my time. No one's returned from that route in decades." He looked up. "Why tell me now?" "Because the birds have returned," she said softly. because the vines are blooming again. And because you're the first one in an age who walked into this place without command or creed. Only curiosity. She let the silence stretch before finishing. If the realm is waking, it may be dreaming of what lies beyond. Ronan folded the map carefully and nodded. Then maybe it's time I followed where it leads. Chapter 22. The Morning of Gifts. The morning air shimmered with something more than light. It wasn't warmth, though the sun rose golden over the rooftops. It wasn't birdsong, though a dozen new voices echoed through the vines, calling to one another in joy. It was magic, not the kind from scrolls or incantations. This was deeper, older. A hum beneath the soil, a current in the breeze, a glow in the leaves that hadn't been there just days ago. The realm was resonating. Ronan stood at the edge of the village and simply breathed. For the first time in his life, the world felt like it was humming in tune with his heartbeat. He turned in time to see the villagers gathering, not with fanfare, with intent. Mother stood in the centre holding a woven satchel lined with sun-dried herbs. Her eyes shone with something like pride, though her words were gentle. "You gave us a story," she said. "We offer you pieces of ours." The gifts came one by one. And last, from one of the children, a tiny charm of twine and bark in the shape of a wolf. "So you don't get lonely." Ronan accepted each one without ceremony, but with quiet reverence, his pack slowly filling with more than just supplies. It filled with meaning. When all was given, Mother stepped forward once more. Her voice was firm but kind. "You do not owe this realm anything more," she said, "but if you choose to walk its forgotten paths, it will remember you. And so will we." Ronan slung the satchel over his shoulder and bowed, not formally, but in thanks. "I'll find the next story," he said, "and I'll carry this one with me." He turned toward the North Trail, map tucked safe inside his coat. As he walked, the village faded behind him, not in silence, but in song. Someone had begun humming the lullaby again, and as Ronan stepped into the pine-lined path, birds overhead joined in, singing not for the realm that was, but the one that had begun to awaken. Chapter 23. The Path Beyond. By sunset, the forest had grown thick with silence again. Ronan's boots crunched over creeping vines and moss-covered stone, the only sounds in a place long reclaimed by time. Trees bowed over the trail like quiet sentinels, their branches heavy with flowering buds that hadn't opened in decades. Life was stirring, but slowly, cautiously. Ahead, half swallowed by ivy and shadows, rose the remnants of the northern outpost. It wasn't much, just a low stone arch, a broken watchtower hunched against the hillside, and the suggestion of ancient walls now fractured by root and weather. Once it had guarded something. Now it was forgotten. Ronan stepped into the clearing and let out a long breath. This'll do. He set up camp in the ruins of the old hall where the roof had caved in long ago, but the stars still found their way in. A small fire crackled in the hearth's bones. The night was quiet, not lifeless, just waiting. He ate sparingly, listened to the fire crackle, and when the stars rose to their full height above the broken beams, Ronan lay back on his bedroll and watched them blink through the gaps. "Wonder what stories you've got waiting," he murmured to the sky. He dreamed of open roads and sealed doors, of whispers beneath stone, and a voice that said not yet, but soon. Ronan stirred before the sun touched the trees. Something in the air had changed. It was subtle, a faint pressure in his chest, like standing beside a ley line. The magic here wasn't asleep anymore. He packed quickly, shouldered his satchel of gifts, and followed the pulse that tugged at his senses. Through the ruined barracks, past a fallen archway, and there, hidden behind a curtain of flowering vines and tangled branches, stood the portal. It was old, ancient even. Unlike the round arches of Alfheim, this one was angular, sharp-edged, etched with long-dead script. Cracks ran along its frame, but its heart was intact. A circle of silver-veined stone, humming faintly now that it had been seen. Ronan reached out, placing one hand on the central glyph. The stone flared. Light bloomed along the runes, first white, then shifting into pale blue, then violet. No ritual, no chant, just recognition. The portal awakened with a low shudder and a soft thrum, like a memory stirring after centuries of silence. The air within the frame turned liquid, swirling like water kissed by stars. Ronan stared at it for a moment, wind tugging at his coat, the hum rising in his bones. No map marked where this path led, no scroll hinted what lay beyond. And yet, he smiled, because the unknown didn't frighten him anymore. It called to him. He turned once, looking back toward the path he'd walked, the forest, the village, the valley where silence had once ruled. Then he stepped forward, one foot, then the other, into the light. The portal swallowed him whole, and behind him, the forest settled again. The vines curled inward, the light faded, but the stone remained warm, the path was open, and the story was far from over.